Let's take a look at our connecting to data example in the working with databases section. We're going to connect to a database, a server, MySQL server, and it's local in this particular case. Most times it will be. You can see we just put some text here, echo some text out, and I'll show you how we do that. We're looking at connecting to data.php. Now we have a username and password right in this file, and I don't recommend that you do that. You should use include files, and you can see those in the include file videos. You want to actually put this somewhere else in a safe directory, and it could also be outside of the main structure of your website, which can help as well. We're going to put it in the files in this section, in a few of the files, in order to demonstrate how this works, but this is not something you want to do. Also, if you have it in multiple files, the same username, password, and you have to update it, well, you have to do a find and replace in order to change it per page, and that's not too good. So you want to look into the include files to get that done. Now the first thing you're going to need to do is to connect to the MySQL server, and you're going to need to specify a username and password in order to do that. As you can see here, the server name is placed in single quotes here. You could use a variable as well. You can use double quotes, it doesn't matter. You can also put $server up here in order to have a server variable here because you're connecting to the server here. Username, password, that's going to get passed along. This is a function that we're going to be handling here just to connect to the server. Connect is going to return a false if you don't connect. So you can do an if condition or some other type of check there to see if you connected. There are ways to do this besides the way that I'm doing it here. This is because SQL and MySQL in general can get a little bit complicated when you're adding the fact that you're learning PHP. So we're trying to break it down in a not simple way, but in a way that is going to be easily digested. So MySQL Connect is the first thing you do. You want to connect. It's like if you're working with sessions, and you'll see that later in the sessions section, you want to actually do a session start. So you have to connect to the server in order to begin the approach of connecting to the database and then executing some commands on the database. So it establishes a connection. And most of the time you're dealing with localhost unless you have that MySQL server on another server actually that's different than the server that you're actually running the web server on. Okay, so we have the or die. This is a special way that we can actually check to see if we have a failure here, and then we're just going to die and tell the user that we couldn't connect and display a MySQL error. Now you don't want to necessarily do that in a production environment because you're actually giving the SQL error, and hackers can actually use this to manipulate your database without your knowledge because they can get this little error information and start that on the road to actually hacking your website. And it's not really a good thing to do it that way. You can have it relocate to an error page. You can have it do a pseudo error page in this page, something more robust, and you get the idea basically from the rest of the training how you might approach that. And we're just echoing out that we successfully connected if an error didn't occur. And we'll talk about errors as we move forward. All right, we do have that samples database here that we've created already, and that's the DB. Now once you actually connect, you want to then select the database. So you're going to connect to the database. We do the same thing here. We use MySQL select DB, or we die and give the database name here to echo that out to let you know which database you couldn't connect to. Again, this is not something that you want to do to let people know the database name when you don't have to. So it's not a good idea. But the approach of hackers is to actually get into your web server and get at your PHP code so they can get that via FTP, and then pretty much they can find your database information if they're good. And it's really not a good thing. It's a real pain to have that happen to you, and you definitely want to take note of all of that. Now after you connect to the database, the last thing you want to do is do a MySQL close. But these days you don't necessarily have to do that because the engine of PHP is very good at handling connections. It's a very, very big thing for web servers to take care of, is handling the connections. So things don't always get closed and open when you think they do. So you don't necessarily have to do this anymore, but that would be a standard thing that you could do, close out the connection, and also test to see if the connection was closed properly. because you do have a connection to the database. And $connect isn't just a true value that comes back when this is true. It's actually a connection to the database, to the server. And we call it a database, but it really is a database server. And it's only false if this doesn't work correctly. So you would close this connection because you could have multiple connections to the database open. And that's going to bring up different issues. So you can see if you have data in one database and data in another, you're going to have to do some sort of connection in order to get to both databases. Well, that's how you connect. And we can refresh, connect as many times as we want to. If we just put in a different username here that's not going to be valid, then you're going to get errors and things like that echoed out. You're going to look at the data error handling video and this little project here, and we'll explain all of this and how we're going to be able to stop this from happening and stop the information from being passed out for your users to see, which is not a good thing. But when you get the warning, you can pretty much see that you either have access or you don't. It'll let you know what you were trying to do as far as the username and the server that you're trying to connect to, and other information about whether or not you're using passwords, which is always a good thing when you're connecting to your database. And these warnings are going to propagate down because it's just going to try to continue with the file, and that's not a good thing either. So that's just how that would work, just to let you know. But connection is pretty easy, and we can continue and actually start to look at data.